Welcome to another conversation here in the 7th Plymouth District. Joining us is State Representative Alyson Sullivan-Almeida. It's been a while since we've had her on camera. How are you?
Good. How are you?
It's been a while. We were kind of chatting before the cameras started rolling.
Yep.
Last time we had a conversation with you was prior to the November election.
Yes. Yeah. We were at Island Grove. So this is the first time I've been in the studio, I think, since the COVID pandemic when masks were required. So it's been a while.
So what is
It's
happening?
so nice to be back.
It's been a few months. How are you? How is everything? How is life treating you?
Good. Good. I think the last time we spoke, I was still Alyson Sullivan. I was married, I think, at that point, or a couple weeks away from getting married. And then now I'm legally Alyson Sullivan-Almeida in the sense of a name change. Waited till after the election to do that. Didn't want to confuse voters on the November ballot without having an opportunity to introduce myself with the new last name. And I'm expecting, and I feel the baby moving right now. So
I think the baby wants to get a few words.
I think so
edgewise
too.
as well.
If the baby's anything like their mom, they're definitely gonna make a mark on this world. That's for sure.
Well, I know that you're a fantastic aunt.
Yes.
Every time we've had you speak, you love being around
Yep.
your niece and nephews.
Yep.
Or is it
Nieces and
nephews?
Yes, there's 4 of them.
What's it like to? I mean, have you had conversations with your siblings about, hey, so what was it like when you were expecting? You got
so
advice?
My sister's the only one that has babies right now. So I've leaned on her quite a bit on, especially the early on pregnancy symptoms, to make sure everything was correct and that I wasn't experiencing anything that's abnormal. And I'm also diabetic, and my sister is a diabetic as well. So leaning on her for some support during this whole process of newly using insulin or kind of monitoring your sugars and your blood sugar levels. My heart breaks for those who have to use insulin every single day, knowing what that's like now, and really fighting those battles of what we call blood sugar levels, right? The highs and lows of blood sugars. It's a very unique and, I think, hard battle at times, trying to find the right foods and what to eat and what not to eat. So I think it might change my perspective a little bit on diabetes, insulin, and what we need to do as a Commonwealth going forward on addressing those issues, especially with childhood diabetes.
The one thing that usually is, talked about is maybe certain things you may crave while carrying. Is that something that has happened to you? I actually have. My stepdaughter is expecting, and
Congratulations.
I hear the conversations about some of the things, some of the unique combinations she enjoys because, she says that's what the baby wants.
Yeah. Whenever I sneak some sugar, I always say it's for the baby, even though it's not a good thing for me. But I was randomly craving not just pineapple, but canned pineapples. Ooh. And then drinking the pineapple juice early on.
That's the best.
Yeah, but I'm not I like pineapple, but not canned pineapple like that, or the juice of the canned pineapple. And then ice cold apple juice was what I was really craving. So I had to find a very low sugar, no sugar added apple juice that I can, get that craving satisfied every now and then.
And you are going to keep the gender of the baby. You're going to wait until the moment of the birth to find out, huh?
Yep. So my husband and I, we decided, we were both luckily on the same page as far as that goes, of waiting to find out the gender of the baby until the baby's born. It's driving everyone crazy. Including his 3 girls. So
is it the odds that it's possibly another girl, or is he kind of?
Well, he's definitely 3 for 3 for girls right now. So he's I think he's slightly hoping for a boy, but as long as the baby's healthy, he's a great girl dad. So if it is a girl, she'll be blessed to have 3 older siblings, older sisters at that. And if it's a boy, God love him, because he has 3 older sisters that are going to be very protective over him. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about new legislative session. We are cruising into April.
Yes.
What has it been like for you? A lot has changed. You have a different administration. The party affiliation is different. We've already seen the new governor's fiscal 24 budget. What's it been like for you?
You know, I think with every kind of new legislative session, it's always finding those balances, right? The new faces that come into the legislative session, working the connections you have so already, building new connections and friendships with the new members. And luckily, we're back in person. So as we were joking before kind of we started this taping is for the last several years, it's been very much remote. So some of the new colleagues who have been on for at least one session are still new colleagues to me because I haven't had an opportunity to meet them in person. It's either been over Teams, Zoom, or over the phone that I was introduced to them. So it's definitely a unique perspective on kind of coming back into a post-pandemic world in the legislative session. And with the governor, like always, even with Charlie and Karen, you know, we're very separate entities at, you know, moments, especially when we're debating the governor's budget. And we've seen it in the past with Charlie's budget and what he's come down the pipeline with, in the ways that we argue certain initiatives in the House, and then the Senate takes up their form of it. And then you know, hopefully by July, if not the beginning of August, we'll have a budget out for the state. I think there's some great priorities as far as our current administration. There's some things I definitely won't necessarily agree with based on some of the talks that I've hearing of their priorities, but I've had a great conversation with our Lieutenant Governor about domestic violence and sexual assault in the hopes that she'll continue some of the work that the prior administration has started.
Knowing that the current governor, Governor Healy, former Attorney General, is it a possibility that she would be someone who would want to help with that bill like Charlie Baker attempted to?
You know, I haven't had the opportunity to speak with our governor about that bill. The specific bill is what you're referring to is, I believe, the dangerousness bill.
Yes.
And that addresses, you know, domestic violence, but not just domestic violence, but violent offenders throughout our Commonwealth, whether it be child rapists or serial arsonists, and addressing kind of the loopholes that are in our criminal justice system right now. And giving more tools necessary to prosecutors and prosecutor's office on holding someone who is dangerous to our community. I know that our current governor supported this bill when Charlie Baker filed it in his previous legislative sessions. So my hope is that either some form of this legislation will come down the pipeline from the administration. If not, I know that Senator O'Connor in the Senate has refiled the legislation. I'm a co-sponsor on that legislation, and we're taking a look at prior filings of the dangerousness bill and figuring out maybe ways of improving it in a way that will get it past this legislative session. So,
what was it? I know it was something that was being touted in the 11th hour, or at least hoping to be able to push it across the line before, you know, the new budget was signed into law last year. Did you hear any kind of feedback as to why it was not something that was universally accepted, or what the issues were, for why you couldn't get the necessary push to make it become a law?
So I know, as you probably are aware, we went into the very wee hours of the morning.
Right.
And it was difficult. It was difficult because you have seen firsthand how so many survivors have come out to advocate for that piece of legislation, the stories that they shared, the vulnerability that they gave, and exposing themselves to real fear and trauma from their abusers and their previous abusers. Unfortunately, I think there was several issues with the bill, and I was hoping that we could move past it and at least get something on the books, whether it be expanding the list of crimes. Like I said, right now, a violent offender who commits child molestation cannot be held under a dangerousness hearing. So in other words, if there's reasons to not be able to hold them on bail or without bail, a child molester can be out free while waiting for his or her day in court. Under a dangerousness bill, under the dangerousness right now, the hearings, the statute only allows to hold for up to 120 days without bail or a bail hearing. The change in legislation would hold that individual up until the end of trial. I know that was a point of contention for some of my colleagues, but it's, to me, until a lot of survivors of domestic violence and violent crimes, someone doesn't become less dangerous after 120 days. Some may argue that they become more dangerous because of taking that stand forward on speaking up and speaking out on what this individual has done to other people. So I know that was one of the hard points that some of my colleagues in the House weren't willing to bend on. But that was another hard point that we on the other side was really fighting for.
Digressing back to the governor's budget, I know one of the couple of things that this administration has been out of the gates early talking about the housing crisis, not having enough housing stock. The MBTA is kind of a big issue. I know it is as far as the effectiveness of the MBTA. You know, here locally, there's a lot of concern with, when the train speeds through this area, whether it's Abington, East Bridgewater, or Whitman, that there's concerns that there have been fatalities, there are people who have been injured. And then there's also a conversation about giving or providing free community college to folks who are 25 plus. When I hear other people who are saying one of the biggest things that needs to be looked at is our Chapter 70 funding formula and the monies that are given to communities. And I know in your district, there are communities that are like, we need all the money that we get, especially like in the town of Whitman that has a shared district with Hanson.
So that's, I think to really digest the budget, it would be a lot longer show than I think what we have time for. But you definitely hit some points there, right? So the MBTA is a really big issue, and hearing from constituents in this district, whether it be the speed of the trains that go through the towns, or it being the accessibility of the MBTA, whether it be the commuter rail, the red line, and the lack of consistency in those times. I've heard from several individuals throughout the communities saying that they rely on public transportation to get to and from work, and unfortunately have been late quite frequently, not because of any fault of their own, but because of the MBTA, the commuter rail, the red line, the buses. So the hope is that we find fixes in those areas as well. I know across the Commonwealth, the job shortage is a big thing in the sense of staffing jobs, not jobs themselves being short. It's just short-staffed, right? So making sure we have qualified people to do the jobs that we need them to do. I know that with the governor's budget, the intent is to hire several people within the MBTA to hopefully combat those issues. Chapter 70 is another big thing, right? We're hearing it throughout, whether it be the circuit breaker, whether it be reimbursement, whether it be transportation for regional school districts. There's several different aspects to our school funding that are constantly falling short. And the hope is that we somehow or another meet that mark of the Chapter 70 formula, that no student, the Student Reform Act that really addressed some shortfalls that we had years ago. We're still seeing it. And what we're seeing more and more in a post-pandemic era is the special needs of different students, whether it be mental health within the school, whether it be transporting them out to different facilities, different school districts, school choice. I mean, there's definitely all these different factors that weren't used to several years ago when they reformed kind of the Chapter 70 funding and the formula. So meeting with the superintendents throughout the district and the regional area, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago in Brockton, and one of the biggest point of contentions was the circuit breaker when it comes to special education. So hopefully we can address those areas, whether it be the reimbursement or how much we reimburse, or lowering that threshold for reimbursement, finding ways to really address those issues so that our students aren't feeling the shortfalls of the state. So,
one of the things I want to commend you on is that you are one of many South Shore legislators who are on Ways and Means.
Yeah. It works great when we have to travel the state. We carpool.
That is fantastic. What has that experience been like?
It's only been, we've had 3 hearings so far, and unfortunately I had to be remote on the last one. But, it's definitely a very unique process on hearing how the budget is just presented with each individual, whether it be Executive Office of Human Health and Services, Education, Child Services, like definitely hearing their needs and what their goals are for this kind of administration and this legislative session. So in this budget cycle. So it's definitely, it's enjoyable, and I can't wait to learn more as I go along.
Any other committees? Have the committee assignments stayed the same? Have you gained any additional for this session?
So the only additional one was House Ways and Means, well, Joint Ways and Means, I should say, and then I'm also still on Judiciary, Mental Health, and then Children and Families. So I'm really looking forward to Children and Families, especially. You know, we had several years ago, I want to say it was during the 2020 era, because obviously I feel like 2020, a lot of people can relate, right, with that year missing, that you lose track of when what happens. But we had a case with David Allman, who was unfortunately found dead in the care and custody of his father, who should never have had him in the first place. And I recently heard that his father pled guilty or admitted to, I don't know if it was pled guilty or admitted to, starving his son. And so we took a deep dive into that case several years, I believe it was 2 legislative sessions ago, in the hopes that we would come with something for the Department of Children and Families. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully doing something to address those issues going forward, to make sure that we minimize any trauma to these children that are very most vulnerable throughout our communities.
The committees that you have retained, any conversations as to what the initiatives are going to be for the next 2 years, or is it kind of just in the process of discussing and kind of getting reacclimated
so I think
to each other?
I think it's definitely in the process. You know, we're having Ways and Means is obviously busier because of the House budget being debated at the end of April. So that'll be, you know, one of the big things as to why we have these meetings. But Judiciary, we're having our first meeting coming up. I think as the process goes along, we'll really find out what the priorities will be. Having conversation and my speculation, I think, you know, I have my own speculations on what this legislative process, you know, in session will look like as far as priorities. You know, if you listen to the governor's address and if you listen to the speaker's address to the House, I believe some of the legislation we're going to be taking up is prison reform, and then also some gun legislation. So I think those will be kind of those 2 big areas this legislative session.
Let's talk about in the district. Have you had a chance to, you know, over the past few months, get out and around to speak with folks? What are some of the things that you've been doing? I do know that we have a little bit of piece of footage that I want to kind of save towards the end.
Yeah.
But what have you had a chance to do to interact with constituents, or at least talk with folks within the communities that you serve?
You know, throughout the whole election process and everything else, in the end of the year and the beginning of the year, we always hold monthly office hours at our senior centers, counseling and aging centers throughout the district. So we hold one in East Bridgewater, Abington, and Whitman monthly. And we're always open and available to meet with constituents outside of those office hours that works best for individuals in the communities. You know, going to different events. You know, Adam Gunn, who's our VSO, does a fantastic job here in Abington. Yep. He, you know, hosts a veterans breakfast every month and at Martin's, which God love Fred, but he does a fantastic job over there. I don't know how he keeps up with some of the flow. I've gone to some of those meetings and the room is packed, standing room only, to the point where the overflow goes to the you know, next room next door. So him and his staff do a fantastic job serving our veterans, and they also open it up to first responders on that first Wednesday of the month for free breakfast. So I think that's phenomenal, and Fred always does a fantastic job there. So being out in the public, in the sense of being accessible, I'm still very accessible. A little bit busier, you know, now that we're back in person, and being on Ways and Means is a very busy committee, but doesn't mean I'm unavailable to our constituents. And Catherine Mullen, who's a newer aide, she came on about this time last year. She's been fantastic at getting back to constituents that email the office or reach out to her. We still have unemployment cases. We still have, you know, special needs throughout the communities, whether it be getting assistance through our RAF programs or food assistance, or just kind of connecting people with the right resources and when they're in need of help. So we're always going to be there as a resource for individuals.
Anything regarding Whitman or East Bridgewater? Have you had a chance to chat with anybody in those communities as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always chatting with our town administrators or town managers, when, especially around the budget cycle, listening to them and what their priorities are and what their needs are, and finding out ways to hopefully secure some state funds. Getting budget priorities from them is a priority, especially the beginning part of the legislative session, because that's the more quicker part of what we're doing. But always, reaching out to them, finding out if they have any events. I was just at the COA in Whitman for St. Patty's Day.
I saw those pictures.
Yeah, Mary and her staff do a fantastic job over there, and Nancy and I are working on hopefully starting a informative session with addressing our seniors on how the legislative process works. Also giving them resources as far as what I can do and assist them if they're ever in need of anything. So working with who's now not my new colleague, but new colleague in the sense of counterpart in East Bridgewater, Jerry Cassidy, who's a great representative for East Bridgewater as well, kind of figuring out ways to address our seniors so that they have a better understanding for the legislative process and how a state rep or state senate can help if they're ever in need. We hear so many stories of seniors getting scammed one way or another, so addressing those issues as well as making sure they have safeguards in place. And then, we've had the Boy Scouts in Whitman and East Bridgewater. We have one coming up soon in East Bridgewater for the Hour of Light. So I always enjoy going out and seeing those young men in our communities doing good and giving back.
It's worth, the reason for the question is because there's been many times that I've been out at events, whether it's the Council on Aging. I've seen you many times where you're not just someone just waving at folks and going, you actually get involved, you help, whether it's the kitchen staff and helping to serve or cutting cake, or just interacting with folks who might have concerns. Folks don't get a chance to see that, so that's why I want to kind of have a chance to mention that, or even seeing you out in public if we could. Let's show a recent parade. I think was the 43rd annual St. Patrick's Day parade. If we could roll that, and oh my goodness, it's right there. It's the part of the parade.
The new sign too.
I was going to say that you got new literature. You can't wait until after the election.
Yep. There's my nephew running by. There's my little nephew running with my sister.
Quick plug to Smiling Greg Eaton and Kenny Sweezy. I didn't recognize him because every time I see him, he's always dressed to the nines.
It's family right there. Yep. My cousins, my aunts, my stepdaughters. There's my husband driving the truck.
Yep.
With my little niece Brooke in the passenger seat. She's too cold.
And then there you are, kind of greeting people, shaking hands. What was it like knowing that you're with child?
Yes.
Did you have to pick the right pair of shoes? Yes. It was windy. What was that day like? Because people don't realize you could have just easily sat next to George in the truck.
I know.
You didn't.
I jumped, so I did have to admit I did jump in the back of the truck, a little bit towards the end, and then I jumped back out. I just needed a quick second to
recharge.
Yes. They don't tell you how much the baby kind of takes the energy out of you. But, I powered through, and it was a great event, and I always run out of candy. And I should not have listened to my husband. I should have got more candy, but we always, somehow or another, if you saw my nephew kind of running back and forth, he was just dumping his buckets of candy out. God love him. Brody was doing a fantastic job. At first, he was complaining how cold he was, and by the end of the parade, he's like, Auntie, I'm really hot. And I'm like, well, running back and forth, they'll do that to you. But it's always nice. It's always nice to see, familiar faces and friendly faces, and being able to see some people that you haven't seen in so long at a parade. And, I was joking with one of the firefighters in Whitman just recently about how, I remember going to this parade and seeing the parade, and now being in the parade, you don't really get to appreciate how well the parade is and how great it is. And you get to appreciate based on like who you see out there and the amount of people you see out there. But I'm definitely jealous of all the bystanders that get to see all the floats go by. So every chance after the parade, I check out all the photos and the videos of different floats. But I have decided that next year we're going to work on getting a flatbed to keep everyone kind of on the flatbed, contain it a little bit better so that we can monitor the candy output so we don't run out by the end of the parade.
I will say it's a spot, and we were, we were kind of stationed where that we got that footage right in front of the Frollo.
Yeah.
And that is, would you say that's a little bit, it's not necessarily the midpoint, is it?
No, that it's always kind of thinking it's the midpoint.
It's not.
No, because, I think a little further up, like I do think you're close to the midpoint of the parade, but you're always kind of deceived, when you go around that bend thinking that you're right at the end, and you're not, because you still get a couple more bends and turns coming up. And, the most people are either at the beginning of the parade, the middle of the parade, and then at the very, very end of the parade. So we did save 2 bags of candy specifically for the end of the paraders, because I always feel bad for them, because I feel like they've waited the longest and they always kind of get shortchanged when it comes to candy.
As we get ready to wrap up this segment, anything we haven't mentioned, but you want to take a couple of moments just to kind of discuss with the viewers?
Yeah, so we actually changed office spaces. We moved up to the 5th floor. I have a window. I know, it's very exciting.
Were you in the basement?
So I started in the basement.
Yeah, I remember that.
I did start in the basement. I started in room 39, and then I went to the 2nd floor, and I was on the 2nd floor for, I think it was a whole entire legislative cycle. And then just recently, I moved up to the 5th floor. So I'm on the 5th floor. Matt Moratori's up there. Steve Zaros is up there. Angelo's my suite mate. So Angelo D'Amelia. So it's nice because he has, a regional school district. I have a regional school district, being able to bounce some ideas off of him. And where we're kind of, abutters when it comes to our districts as well, because he represents Bridgewater. Rain and I represent East Bridgewater. So having that kind of, and he's a great legislator. He's a wealth of knowledge. So having that ability to kind of bounce ideas off of him is going to be, I think, very helpful for me and for the district in this process.
If our constituents are watching right now, they want to find out more information, if they want to reach out to your office, is there a simple and quick way to do that?
And the best and easiest way to do it is through email. Alyson.Sullivan. I asked them not to change my email address because it will really screw things up. But Alyson.Sullivan@mahouse.gov, and then my legislative aide is Catherine.Mullen@mahouse.gov.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us
and
allowing us to share a little bit of the footage of the parade.
Yes.
And hopefully we can have you back in before the new budget is agreed upon and signed into law.
Yes. And before the baby gets here.
Before the baby gets here. Because then you'll be out of commission for a bit.
Yeah, or the baby will be here with me and there'll be a crying baby in my arms.
We're okay with that. We accommodate.
Sounds good to me.
You got it. All right. Well, we want to thank you very much for tuning in to this particular program to keep you up to date as to what's going on with your legislators up at the State House. Until next time, have a great day.